Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Are They Fascist? Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Kingfish himself, Huey Long, and try as much as possible to answer the question, was Huey Long a fascist? Now, I've done another video about Huey Long, and you can find a link to that below. It's a bit more biographical in nature, whereas this is going to attempt to look at his political ideology. Now, this video is going to be a bit of a challenge because Huey Long has been claimed and rejected by every side of the American political spectrum, with at least some justification. People have said he was a New Deal liberal. People have said that he was a reactionary. People have said that he was a conservative, a nationalist, a Christian Democrat, a socialist, a communist. Basically, everything that he could possibly be accused of being, he has been, and all of these things have some degree of truth to them, which is kind of makes this interesting. When asked about his political views, Huey Long said, "I'm in a league of my own," or "I'm basically my own thing." And that's probably a good way to look at it. Now, as always, I don't rig these things beforehand, and I'm not exactly sure where he's going to end up. My guess would be in the parafascist category, but we'll see. Number one, an ideological syncretic mixture of reactionary, conservative, and revolutionary / progressive ideas. Huey Long gets a full point here. As one person said, he was the first Southern politician in a generation to talk about something other than blacks. That was not the major focus of his campaigns. I'm sure he talked about it from time to time, but the major focus was infrastructure, economic modernization, more rights for poor people, free textbooks, stuff like that. Blacks were not keeping blacks down or preventing blacks from voting or that sort of thing was not a major focus of his administration, at least not more so than any other Southern politician. Likewise, though, he very much embodied a lot of aspects of the Old South. He had a very Southern pastor style of preaching. He would frequently reference the Bible. There was a crackdown on gambling and prostitution when he came to power. You know, the old, stereotypical, he's a good old boy, he's part of the system, he's one of the guys. Huey Long, while he didn't come from that background, he very much embraced that when he became the leader of Louisiana. So you have someone who has a lot of kind of culturally conservative Christian ideas mixed with a lot of kind of modern ideas, and then eventually we'll get into some of his quasi-socialist share the wealth ideas. So I definitely think Huey Long would be in this category. And I think this is one of the reasons why people call him a fascist, is you can't really clearly say he's part of the political left, like the New Deal coalition, or he's part of the political right. He's like with the Republicans from this time period. Identitarianism with a clearly defined in-group and out-group, cultural, religious, ethnic, or racial. Now, one of the issues with covering subnational leaders like Huey Long is they don't deal that much with the international scene. You don't necessarily know what their opinions are in other countries, how they would manage foreign affairs. We do know what Huey Long's opinion was on foreign affairs, but it's very hard to know what he would have actually done had he come to power. If he would have pursued the policies he said, how he would have dealt with other countries, I don't really know. Likewise, the time period he was in power, the idea of white governance and blacks not voting was pretty much enshrined within the South. So it just kind of wasn't really an issue that needed to be addressed a lot. Now, as a populist, he did use this in more of a class warfare sense, but I'm going to have to give this I think a 0.5, because I think if the racial issue had come up, he would probably be less more moderate on it than a lot of Southern politicians at the time, but he definitely was in a socioeconomic sense. It's hard. I'm going to give him half a point because I think the anti-elitist rhetoric, well, not exactly this, is somewhat analogous. A revanchist or romantic nationalist desire to restore the nation to its former glory or avenge itself against a historical foe. So this is difficult because, once again, he was not the leader of the country. He wasn't the leader of America. There's aspects of romantic nationalism to Huey Long's ideology. Talking about the the Share of Wealth program, fulfilling the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Um, that he was bringing about an America of like white property holders, similar to what the idea was before corporations had taken over. I don't really think there was much of a revanchist compared to a lot of Southern leaders who tended to be very anti North. I can't really remember too much from his uh, time as governor of him really dissing the North or talking about the Union or really talking about the Civil War that much in general. He did go and campaign quite a bit for Roosevelt in like Iowa and some of the coal mining states to great effect. So I'm actually going to say no, I don't think this applies here. Well, he definitely was conservative on cultural issues, and you could argue an American nationalist. I don't think it was anything particularly out of line with what was normal at the time. A belief in the supremacy of the party or the state. I think it's more accurate to say that Huey Long believed in the supremacy of himself, but we'll definitely give him a point here. Louisiana under Huey Long was run as one of the most, I don't know if totalitarian is the right term to run it, but one of the most authoritarian states possible, in which he controlled basically every level of government through a combination of patronage, threats, a willingness to unleash the mob on people. Basically, what wound up happening is when Huey Long came to power, all the legislators either got on his payroll, became his allies, or he systematically used the state's resources, his own resources, and his party's resources to just absolutely smash everybody in his way. Even when he became senator from Louisiana, the governor of Louisiana was just his puppet, and whenever he was in the state capital, he would kick the governor out of his office and use it instead. There was the guys who got kidnapped ahead of a vote. Basically, I would just say, in terms of holding absolute political power within a jurisdiction, I think it's hard to go further than Huey Long did. Also, the Democratic Party was so dominant in Louisiana at the time, it was basically a one party state. I'm not even sure if the Republicans bothered to run candidates in a lot of elections. Whoever won the Democratic primary was able to win the general election. However, he did have a lot of issues with the Democrats on the national stage, as a lot of them found him embarrassing, crude, or otherwise unpleasant to deal with. But like I said, it's more of a personalist thing. It's more of a belief in his power and his political machine. But the degree of personal influence and control that he had over the state of Louisiana is something I can't really think. There's not really an equivalent I can think of in the history of the United States. A conception of an idealized new man. There was probably some aspect to this. I can't really remember very much relating to this. Like I said, Huey Long is kind of this weird mixture of different things. I don't think that really came up that much. He was more of kind of a conservative on stuff like that, like the working man, the good old boys, that kind of thing. So I don't think anything really about his conception of the average person was that revolutionary or that different or something like that. It was just your basic populace. The average person is like a hardworking, good person who goes to church. The elites are really scumbags, that sort of thing. I don't really see any attempt to like fundamentally change human nature to completely like just kind of upend the table. A foreign policy that places national self-interest above ideology or morality. I would probably agree with this. I'm going to give him a point here. Huey Long was an hardcore isolationist who didn't want America to get involved with either World War or just with the international scene in general. He felt that America, as the greatest country in the world, is a wealthy country. Maybe they could trade with some other people, but there was nothing really to be gained by doing stuff outside of it. He even, in kind of echoing some stuff that you get from kind of the modern left, complained that Standard Oil was carrying out coups throughout Latin America to put pro oil governments in power for the United States economic interests. He was basically just like an isolationist who supported American nationalism and wanted America to just be a strong and free fortress of democracy that didn't get involved in the world. Very non ideological. An indifference to or marginalization of economics. This is a really rough one because I'm going to have to give it a point. But Huey Long didn't really have any understanding of how like economics worked. He had a lot of populist policies that, if you put them all together, resembled something like sort of like an economic policy. But on the whole, it was just kind of very piecemeal. You had some things that I guess you could say are conservative, some things that are liberal. I think on the whole, you could say Huey Long was definitely on the left in terms of his economic policies, be it taxes or when he was governor, immense infrastructure building, more fees from oil. The other thing is, once again, whenever we're dealing with Huey Long, there's a lot of Robin Hood aspects to him, of robbing to the rich and giving to himself and giving to his friends. So corruption kind of blankets a lot of this, but generally speaking, his government could be seen as like Keynesianism on steroids, where immense amounts of money were spent on public works, be it highways, universities, textbooks, healthcare, education, all kinds of different stuff. Debt in Louisiana massively increased. I believe the taxes on the wealthy in Louisiana went up. And his ultimate plan, the Share Our Wealth plan, was to cap personal fortunes beyond a certain amount, where there would be a 100% tax rate. I forget what it was. I think it was incomes over $1 million a year. It was something like that. And then that money would be redistributed. Now, he stated that he was not against capitalism or a market economy. In fact, when somebody said his program was communism, he said, my communism, my plan is the only defense this country's got against communism. Or maybe it was against socialism, but you get the point. Is he viewed his redistribution of wealth program as being something that would leave capitalism for the vast majority of the population intact. People could still own businesses, people could still run farms, people could still have corporations. It's just there was going to be a cap at how much people could have, and there would be redistribution to ensure that all of society gained within it. So he claimed it was based on the Bible and the Declaration of Independence. A lot of people called him a socialist. The actual socialists hated him, largely because they saw him as a reactionary and a buffoon. So, well, I don't think Huey Long really had what we would consider today to be a coherent economic plan like Marxism or neoclassical economics, or even something you get in Japan or Korea, like state instigated or state directed economics. That definitely was more important to him than a lot of identity issues would be. A masculine approach to problem solving, focusing on decisive action. Yeah, I mean, that's. What other reason do you establish a personalist dictatorship? Other than that's the main justification for any leader in history, good or bad, for taking absolute power is the process is too slow. We have too many corrupt politicians. We have too many people who are they're not making decisions. They're taking too long. The people need money now. The people need the free textbooks now. They need the highways now. I don't want to have to worry about Louisiana State House passing any of this stuff. We're going to deal with this at the moment. If anyone gets in my way, if anyone tries to screw with me, I'm going to destroy their career. I'm going to ruin their life. In the one case, I'm going to get people kidnapped. I'm going to just do whatever it takes to achieve my personal and political goals. I think, once again, for whatever other purpose do you establish a personalist dictatorship than to have that ability? Incurred a mass political action, often in the form of a political party or other organizations. I mean, Huey Long was the archetypical populist. the entirety of his campaign was based on rallying all the poor white working class uh, residents of Louisiana together in a broad political coalition. It was to go to those like farming towns where no one had ever visited and say, look, I'm going to get you subsidies, I'm going to get you highways, vote for me. Going to like urban poor whites and saying kind of similar things, having massive rallies, being able to whip up support from the general public whenever the state house or whenever legislators or whoever went up against him. That was his whole thing, was to get mass political action from the people of Louisiana. Uh, a, a, a definition of despotism that I've always kind of liked is it's someone who rules, a single man who rules with the direct support of the population, with no intermediaries. And I think that's a good way to describe Huey Long. So, yeah, he definitely gets a point here. Vanguardism, or the belief in elite inner group to safeguard the new order / revolution. I don't think Huey Long ever really thought of it in those sophisticated terms, but his entire operation was a political machine that was defined largely on the basis of whether you were loyal to Huey Long or not. The fact that you had longest and anti-longest politicians in the state for the next couple of decades, I think very much kind of plays into that. Huey Long viewed his political program as something that needed to be protected. Hence, why when he became a senator, he got someone to be the governor, but the person who was the governor just did whatever he told them to do. And I think ultimately he wanted to establish a similar, as much as possible, system for America. So there definitely was an inner circle. There was a mass network of patronage and bribery. Is it exactly the same as what you'd see in Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union? No. But there was definitely an idea that there was going to be this new elite, even if it wasn't that formal, who would hold all the power within Louisiana and perhaps America. An often charismatic leader who wields, I don't think we really need to go further than that. Like I said, Huey Long's entire political plan was based on Huey Long, what was good for Huey Long, that sort of thing. So his entire shtick was his personal charisma. He held absolute power over the state, over the Democratic Party. He had the share the wealth movement, the every man a king movement. Eventually, if you play Kaiserreich, he had the America First movement. I don't think I really need to go into. If anyone here knows anything about Huey Long, they know that that was his main selling point, was his charisma, was his folksiness, was his ability to whip up a crowd. And finally, sublimation of the individual and individual rights into the interests of the group, party, or state. This is somewhat debatable. You did see immense amounts of corruption happen during his time in office. But once again, I don't know if that's really necessarily ideologically motivated, or that's just Huey Long wanted power and he was willing to do anything to get it. With some exceptions, I don't think his like reign in Louisiana saw like mass confiscation of guns or that sort of thing. Although I do think some newspapers were shut. You know what? I'm gonna give him half a point here because there was a lot of shenanigans that went down in Louisiana where people's personal property rights and their employment rights and all kinds of other stuff would be taken away, provided that Huey Long felt it was in Huey Long's best interest and the best interest of the Democratic Party or the state of Louisiana. Once again, though, it was ultimately what was in the benefit of Huey Long. So let's tally this up. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 1. Okay, so Huey Long gets 9, which is about where I thought he would be. So he is in the para-fascist category on the cusp of being a full-on fascist, which I think is pretty accurate. The main things that kept him from getting the full-on is he didn't really have this conception of like the new man and this desire for revenge. There's a bit of that when it came to the upper classes, but you just don't have the same sort of I don't know what you want to call it, like progressivism that you saw in certain fascist movements. It's hard to describe, but basically it was just not as much of a systematic ideological system as a lot of other people with similar policies had. It was ultimately down to Huey Long. You didn't have anything like the doctrine of fascism or To My Legionaries or Mein Kampf or the Communist Manifesto or some sort of elaborate theory as to how the state and society should run. You had a mixture of populist, conservative, liberal, um, socialistic, fascistic, all kinds of just random ideas thrown together and stewed in a pot. And while that is in a lot of ways what fascism is a bunch of stuff thrown together and stewed in a pot, you're lacking the extreme nationalism, the extreme identitarianism, and some of the I guess you could say more esoteric aspects of it that you'd see in other groups. Ultimately, Huey Long can just be categorized as a populist. If you want to categorize him as a left wing populist or a right wing populist, there's arguments to be made on both sides when it comes to Huey Long. But I do think ultimately, while he has a lot of similarities with fascism, and I don't think the comparison is bad necessarily, because he has a lot of that flavor. I don't think you can necessarily compare him to some of the other people we've looked at. Once again, because he is lacking a concrete, abstract worldview in the way that someone like Hitler or Mussolini would have, or the integralists in Brazil would have, or even I guess the Japanese didn't have exactly. No, they had something like that with the Kokutai and some of Prince Conaway's theories. So that's where I put Huey Long. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Should he have been higher? Should he have been lower? Did I give him too many points in some areas, not enough points in other areas? If you like the series, post some suggestions below. This was kind of fun. I'm not sure if I really need to modify